the pretty inexorable reality that most of the data extraction methods that they tend to rely on for their business are probably going to go the way of the dodo.
Welcome to Punchy by Rival, where we take the gloves off to share the hard-hitting realities of the challenger marketing world. Each week, we'll break down the buzz and cut through the BS, the top stories and trends to tell you what you really need to know and do differently to grow your brand and career. All right, welcome back to another edition of Punchy. We're going to be diving into one of what we think is the most important stories that you as marketers need to know and have an opinion on this week. I know we talked about sexy candy last time, and it's tough to top the importance of what should Mars do with their spokes candies, but we're going to try with this week's edition talking about the Department of Justice in the United States bringing a lawsuit to try to break up Google's advertising business. And I have to say, one of us this week is joining from a tropical paradise, although if you were looking at the camera, it's kind of hard to tell who that would be. But if you look at the latency on the video, I think you can tell just based on the internet. Yeah, it is not DuBose. It is Jenna dialing in from the Seychelles. So we'll see what that does for her attitude and energy on this edition. Shall we get into it? So, as a quick summary, but we're going to include a bunch of links in the show notes, the U.S. Department of Justice accused Alphabet Inc.'s Google of abusing its dominance in digital advertising. The government said Google should be forced to sell its ad manager suite, tackling a business that generated about 12% of Google's revenue in 2021, but also plays a vital role in the search engine and cloud companies' overall sales. Google, whose advertising business is responsible for about 80% of its revenue, and that was $50 billion last quarter alone, said the government was, quote, doubling down on a flawed argument that would slow innovation, raise advertising fees, and make it harder for thousands of small businesses and publishers to grow. So let us get into it. Jenna, you may or may not have posted this article on your LinkedIn saying, "Make America's trust busting great again." Would you like to elaborate your position?
I don't know if people are familiar. We have international listeners. People listen to us from all over the world. There was a time in American history when America was, in fact, great, and that was the time of Roosevelt and American trust busting at its absolute best. And I am 100% hoping to make America great again by breaking up some of these absolutely ridiculous tech monopolies. There's a couple different antitrust lawsuits going on with the DOJ right now, and this one is the more ambitious of the two. I think the real big problems I think that Google is actually going to run into is the other antitrust lawsuit that they have going on about their search business. But I am hyped to see this. This is go big or go home vibes from the DOJ, and I am fucking here for it. Let's go. I have asked Viren what it will cost for me to get a little button that if I press the button, it goes, "Let's get ready to rumble." And I really want it. We need to budget for this for me. This needs to be in our media budget. I'm hyped. Let's go.
All right. Before I go over to DuBose, Jenna, from a performance marketer, paid media planner, buyer perspective, what's actually happening here? What is the Department of Justice saying Google needs to do if they do win this suit?
The specific remedy that they're actually seeking for this is that they're trying to unwind the acquisition of DoubleClick that was about 15 years ago. So basically they want Google to separate out its buy side and sell side technologies. Because right now, Google owns the tools on both ends of your digital ad auction for a pretty large percentage of the open internet and open web inventory. I think in the DOJ filings, they say something that DoubleClick owns, I think something like 90% of the market share on, I think it's the buy side essentially with DoubleClick. And that is, functionally a monopoly along with a lot of other implications about how Google manipulates prices. And I do think that there's a couple other potentially fraudulent criminal investigations going on, specifically around accusations that Google has been manipulating bid prices for a lot of its inventory. This is separate from that. But functionally what the DOJ specifically wants is that Google should no longer own both ends and in the middle part of the ad auction. They should be forced to unwind that.
Cool. DuBose, are you ready to rumble with this? Where are you at?
I've never felt more strongly about buy-side and sell-side antitrust conversations than I have right now. I think, as Jenna said, it's an interesting one for a few reasons to me. I think, there's the idea that, if one organization has too much power like this, you start to see the idea of conversations around trust and measurement. You start to see the stifling of competition. So I think there is something similar to, Microsoft and browsers being bundled in the operating system in the late 90s and early 2000s. That is obviously a high-stakes conversation. We saw what happened to Microsoft in that, and continuing fines, and the idea that Internet Explorer's dominance was eroded further against competitor browsers. But I think there is also the idea that this fundamentally is going to be at a certain point good for the market to break up. It's going to be good for innovation, and it's going to be good in the long term for advertisers. I think there's been a challenge here when you hear about antitrust in digital advertising, be it Google, be it Facebook, be it others, that this is going to ultimately harm the small businesses that rely on the digital marketing ecosystem. And I say to that yes, there may be some short-term pains, but I think what we're seeing are some very valid discussions around the idea that for the medium and long term of the advertising industry and the digital advertising and media industry, this is a valid and useful conversation to have.
All right, Jen, I'm going to bring it back to you. So long-term, big picture, it sounds like we all think this is probably moving things in the right direction. Over the next, let's say, 12 to 24 months, does this actually change anything? If I'm a marketer out there, are there things that I should be thinking about or potentially doing differently, keeping an eye on? Or is this like, it's going to take a long time before this actually makes a difference in my life, for my career, my business, my team?
I mean, yeah, like the reality of this is that this is not, going to be an overnight thing. I'm not a lawyer. Our regular listeners will be shocked to hear I'm not a lawyer. But I do know that, like I said, that cases of this level of complexity, and that, most legal analysis says that, this is actually, again, kind of a bit of a reach under current, antitrust established case law, and that it's not clear that the DOJ will be successful at all. And even if they are, that the specific remedy that they're seeking, again, to unwind the DoubleClick acquisition is not necessarily what will happen. The cause of action that like the DOJ is using for this is that they're saying that government agencies that advertise with Google have essentially overpaid for their advertising as a result of Google's anti-competitive practices. And so one of the possible remedies is that Google doesn't have to change anything, and in fact they're just ordered to pay restitution to the government for some of like the overspend or the overpayment on ads. And so there may be absolutely zero changes that come out of this, even if the DOJ is successful, legally speaking, with this case. That said, Google's legal department has, over the past couple of years, in the face of increasing regulatory pressure and scrutiny, not just on this, but on other things like privacy, like I said, the antitrust allegations on their search business, they're making really significant changes to their product mix, essentially to the controls that advertisers have as a result of this kind of regulatory pressure. And also, it now seems, I think, for the first time, not like unfathomable that Google and frankly, some of the other like walled gardens are maybe no longer these kind of like unchecked behemoths, that there actually is going to be a serious challenge to the way that they do business in the marketing landscape. And so if I'm a marketer who is 100% reliant on the Google tech stack for everything, if I'm on Campaign Manager and SA360 and DB360 and whatever else, maybe I might be thinking about, what kind of a long-term play is this? Again, this comes with several countries in the EU challenging essentially the legality and usage of GA4. Again, the search business is under attack, leaving aside some of the things that like we're seeing, performance pushback on some of the changes that they've made to advertiser controls with Performance Max campaigns, a couple other things. It's possible that this leads to a death by 1,000, cuts scenario for Google of, yeah, they're probably going to continue to make a mint and things aren't going to change too much on the day-to-day with my like marketing operations. But like, this is not financial advice. I have puts on Google in 2025. Like, I am short on them in the long term. I am down on Google. I would be thinking about what are, the other opportunities and the other platforms I need to be testing, not just for my display, but also for like my search and kind of intent-based campaigns, for my measurement solutions. Pretty much everything is now, I think, at risk, or at least something that you should be assessing that risk if Google is your main provider for this.
DuBose, anything to add?
I think, as Jenna mentioned there, there's probably two elements of thinking about where Google goes after this. I think from the idea of the direct advertising and digital media business, I think this does force fundamentally some shifts and a rethink if more than just kind of a slap on the wrist fine kind of comes through, and how they can start to show more compliance and not just demand trust from advertisers in the market, but be forced to really build that trust. I do think this is not financial advice, but I think the wider ability of Google to pivot, I'm less worried about, given the idea that even this week you see that, the Chat GPT kind of threat to search engines has forced Google to release Bard and talk about integrations of conversational AI into their search interface being rolled out over the next few months. I don't doubt that a company with the size and resource, the size of Alphabet and Google, will be able to pivot where they need to continue to flourish and grow. I do think, however, this is going to be a prod out of one of the core businesses operating in the way that it currently does.
I don't know. Like, do you really think that they're gonna like pivot out of this? I feel like that Google, over its corporate history, has showcased a remarkable inability to do anything significant other than acquire other companies that do good things and consolidate them in the ad space. And its core search business, which actually has been declining a lot in quality, largely because of things that we do as marketers, people gaming SEO and like a couple other things. I don't know. Like, I think that the layoffs were done poorly. I don't want to turn this into a let's all shit on Google's corporate strategy meeting. I'm way more excited about the legalities and the implications of the DOJ case. Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like that how many failed projects have we all seen from Google? Like, you guys remember when you saw Larry riding around on the New York subway with Google Glass? Like, I see very little evidence from them that they're able, like I said, to make these types of big pivots. And I think that the pretty inexorable reality that most of the data extraction methods that they tend to rely on for their business are probably going to go the way of the dodo. I don't think that Google in 10 years, I think that Google in 10 years, is as declined as Facebook and Meta are now. Facebook and Meta hit the gas in a weird way, but I see that Google is kind of like a slowly collapsing like a flan in a cupboard over the next 10 years, honestly.
I think, flan is a good analogy, delicious yet collapsing. I think there are probably some elements of Google that have succeeded in a way that's subtle. I think one of the things I always believe about Alphabet and Google structure is that when it does well, it tends to integrate something into your life in a way where you almost take it for granted. I think a lot of the things they've done in smart home, a lot of the things they've started to do in self-driving and autonomous vehicles, a lot of the kind of acquivation, that's acquisition and innovation, just made that up, that they've done throughout the market really starts to, get places where insidiously they're in a lot of elements of our life. I think to your point, when you look at the core business, this is an interesting one. But if you were to take some of the acquivation kind of policy that they have and apply it to this, maybe they just go kidnap the CEO of DuckDuckGo. Next thing you know. But aside from whoever that is, putting an extra lock on his door, you're right. It's probably a bit of a worry.
But it is. I mean, fundamentally, if we just look at the numbers, advertising is still 80% of Google's business. So to Jenna's point, I mean, to your point, DuBose, yeah, they've made a lot of headlines. They've done a lot of things. I've got a Google Home in my kitchen, but still, they are fundamentally a digital advertising business. They haven't been able to change that. And you have to think that they've actually wanted to try. It hasn't just been about innovation theater, that they've purposefully seen this coming for years or knew that it was going to come up in some way, shape, or form at some point, and they haven't yet been able to diversify. Now, maybe there's a little bit more urgency as these conversations start to become more real for them. But I think I probably side with Jenna on the fact that they haven't actually shown an ability to truly diversify outside of search yet. The other thing, we haven't talked about Bing. at all? Is that just like
No
not
one
part of the
talks about
conversation? I mean, we had a lead come in from Bing last week. It's got what, 10% market share? Is everybody in the Bing team, wherever they sit, are they just rejoicing about this? Who's the winner here?
Probably.
I guess that's kind of my question.
I don't know. Well, I think hopefully, like, the winner is the open internet. I don't know. I'm getting political about this. I 100% believe, like, regardless of, again, the specific legalities that will determine the success or the failure of this particular DOJ case, I think that Google has behaved uncompetitively and it's bad for advertisers, and that realistically people should be rooting for this to succeed and for there to be a breakup of Google's, like, monopoly on this. Their response to this whole thing of, oh no, like Amazon and Facebook and all these other companies are capturing these huge shares of advertising. Yeah, but it's entirely different advertising. It's the same as, like, the frustration that we all have with our cable and internet providers, that they have perfectly sliced up geographic areas so that, certain geographic areas only have one cable provider, but over the course of the country they all have different market share essentially, and so that they've avoided the technical, like, classification of a monopoly. But even from the perspective of a consumer, you're in a bad position. Like, yes, TikTok advertising exists, but functionally, if I want to buy display inventory, pretty much Google and DoubleClick is kind of the only shop in town, and that that's not great. Google even admits in their response to this claim, they're like, oh, publishers get the overwhelming majority of revenue, essentially to 70%, essentially admitting that they're taking 30% of advertisers' dollars in unauditable, unprovable, oftentimes, frankly, fraudulent, uncontrollable spend. If you can tell marketers you should act like you're losing control of 30 cents on every dollar that you place on Google, whether or not that's actually valuable and good for you, but you have zero insight or control into it, and it's allowed to continue because of Google's practices, that's bad. People should be rooting for this actually to be a success. This is where the let's get ready to rumble button would be super helpful, because I could have pressed it here for impact.
Let's get ready to rumble!
But yeah, but I feel like, yes, everybody should be on. I don't want to root for Microsoft. That's not really a David and Goliath story. That's like a Goliath and a older, less cool Goliath. I don't really know. That's not a good analogy. But yeah, I feel like everybody should be rooting for this to succeed, honestly.
I think you raise an interesting point. Well, the Goliath versus super Goliath narrative is never really going to catch on,
Yeah,
especially when normal Goliath has not proven to be very good at Goliathing in the last 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
But I think, the thing that I think we do have to bear in mind is, like, let's assume that there's a fundamental shift from Google in the marketplace and its offering that breaks this up in a way similar to kind of telcos when all the bells were created. I think, one of the interesting things is, and I think, Jenny, you raise it when you talk about access to, like, internet and cable kind of coming out of something like the breakup and the regionalism of telcos over, 30 years, 40 years later. I think one of the things I think is interesting is this needs to be followed up with strong regulation and oversight for who comes in to fill the market, so that you're not just getting a lot of smaller players trying to, like, fill a competitive advantage by also skirting different rules and regulations. I think it's a good thing. Hit the, let's get ready to rumble button, but then let's put a smaller button next to it that's like, let's tighten regulation and oversight. I don't know if Michael Buffer yells that as well.
I don't think that'll get pushed as often, but we could try.
Probably not. But I 100% agree, which is also one of those, like, crazy. It's crazy to me that people in marketing, like, this was exactly this point DuBose was at the IAB. Shit, I guess we'll have to find out, like, what conference this was. But, like, a senator came and spoke to really, really senior marketers, essentially at IAB, who was like, oh no, like, we're probably not going to pass, like, some of this, like, privacy and, like, tech legislation specifically aimed at big tech. You don't have to worry about it. And that, like, senior marketers are kind of just, like, accepting this a little bit. It seems to be, like, people jamming their fingers in their ear going, like, la, 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 I don't want to hear it. Like, maybe in the United States right now, due to our current terrible governmental dysfunction, there may not be regulation on this, but I guarantee you that in Europe, there absolutely is going to be action on these types of things. And marketers 100% need to adjust to the reality now that, again, the types of behaviors and, like, business practices coming from the Googles and the Facebooks and the Amazons Amazon, I think, is 100% like cruising for a bruising on their like use of their like marketplace data. Consumers don't like these things. And for a group of people that are supposed to really understand consumer desires and behaviors, we seem very willfully ignorant on the reality that most people do not want businesses to continue behaving this way. And inevitably, it will be the case that they are not allowed to, and that people are just kind of ignoring this is like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills a little bit. I could also go for that button. That's from Zoolander. That must be much less expensive to license. The Mugatu, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. That would also take that button.
So it was the IAB's 2021 Annual Leadership Summit. They had Senator Ron Wyden and Dr. Anthony Fauci. So must have been an interesting conversation.
Where was it held? Was that in the Seychelles?
I don't know. That's all the information I have. I just found a tweet that they put out January 2021.
It's the Davos of digital advertising, I hear.
Nobody should come to the Seychelles. No one come here. Only I should come.
It's terrible,
No one
right?
else should
Yeah.
come here.
All right. We will let
it's
Jenna
horrible.
get back to her. How did you describe it to me? Science fiction sized tropical fruit that you've been eating over there.
They're really big.
So I'm very jealous about. I don't
papayas
get
are
jealous
so
about the
big.
beaches. I do get jealous about the fruit. All right. Rants and or raves. DuBose, what you got?
So I'd like to rave about the idea that basically in the last 24 hours, they've started to roll out the new branding for Burberry, the new creative expression, I believe they're calling it. But as a normal person would call it, you change the logo. And I really like it. So if you haven't seen it yet, go and check it out. I think Burberry was an interesting one in that obviously their last rebrand took them in the same kind of black block text as every single other brand in a similar bit of the sector. And their new one's actually quite nice. It brings back what they call the equestrian night design heritage motif. If you can look past that or make a jazzy acronym out of it, I think what you find is it's really nice. They've done originally as a logo from the early 1900s, actually a fan submitted logo of a knight on a horse surrounded by the Burberry logo. Not minimalist at all, not kind of the normal modern standard black text you're going to get for either coffee shops or luxury brands. And I think there's something really nice about it when a brand leans back into its heritage, understands that maybe there's been a bit of a vibe shift when it comes to aesthetics for branding, and gets ahead of it. So really, really cool and good on them.
I like it. We'll include a link in the show notes, but it is very busy, isn't it? It's gonna be interesting to see how they shrink that
It's an
down.
expression.
Yeah.
Well, it's a heritage motif. So you get busy all over that.
Jenna?
I feel like I just ranted a whole lot in this episode. I may have been a little too enthusiastic. I may have gone a little overboard. But I've still got one. I've still got a rant. My rant is this is so semantic. I'm really tired of people saying AI when they mean machine learning and automation. If you keep referring to like ChatGPT or other like large language model, like machine learning as AI, you have not watched enough creepy sci-fi, watched or read enough creepy sci-fi about the singularity. Like just go rewatch the Terminator franchise and put, some respect on true AI's name and start referring to it as machine learning and automation. Like you're not appropriately existentially afraid of what would happen if AI were really a thing, if you're just casually throwing it around all the time. It's shitty branding. Don't let people.
So is it more about getting the terminology wrong? Because that's something I know I've heard DuBose rant about as well, is people mixing up AI and ML. Or is it more about people not being sufficiently afraid of what this could become?
It can be both. Yeah, I definitely want people to be more afraid of what AI is. Like rooting for what is it for artificial general intelligence is not a like that's a Bond supervillain thing. Like if you're actively rooting for a reality that somebody like Goldfinger would want, Well, Goldfinger actually had fairly simplistic aims. I don't think that he just wanted to steal a bunch of gold. Maybe he's not the best example, but it's a supervillain desire. Like to be rooting for AI like that is like question the people that are associated with you if that's what you want. But also, I do think that it like makes you look a little bit ignorant if like you don't really understand that like what the difference between machine learning and AI is, and it's kind of also like do I really trust you to make decisions about fairly complex, sophisticated tools that, we need to make ethical and serious business decisions about if you don't know what they are? And also, you look like a Bond villain. I don't, that really undercuts your seriousness in conversations, I find. And we all know how serious I like to be. Yeah.
I love if there's a missing scene from Terminator 2 where someone's like, oh, look out, it's a giant learning language model. And someone's like, actually, that's artificial intelligence. So if there's not,
and that
someone
would
should
be
make that.
like actually really scary. Yeah, like
oh my God, I thought it was just a machine learning algorithm. No, that's actually proactive intelligence.
See, that would be really horrifying. But again, now if we say AI all the time, what year, DuBose, you'll know, what year does Terminator take place in? Or wait, has it already happened?
So the problem with the Terminator timeline is they've actually messed with it quite a bit because Judgment Day originally, I think, was in 2004, 2008. And obviously we've blown through that. Now I think they're setting it at like 2050. But yeah, I think the original one was like 2023. Los Angeles was like a bombed out robot war zone. And, we still got 11 months. So don't know if it's going to happen. Seems unlikely, but
Same
see where it goes.
thing with Blade Runner, I think. It also makes me think of, I feel like we could do one of those. Do you remember those, I forget what the series was called, but the like cartoon musical videos from elementary school where they were teaching you about like conjunctions and different like English grammar. Then conjunction, junction, what's your function? I feel like
Schoolhouse Rock.
Was it Schoolhouse
How do you
Rock?
know that that's called Schoolhouse Rock?
Thank you. We could do one of those for AI ML.
Yes.
I feel like that would actually do pretty well. Maybe we'll put that in the Rival to the Thing bucket. See if we can script something. But we'll have to have ChatGPT.
I'm asking ChatGPT to make that right now.
Yeah, same thing. All right. That's all the time that we got for today.
ChatGPT could not beat conjunction junction.
Them's
Give it
fighting
time.
words. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Punchy is a production of Rival. We are a growth consultancy that builds challenger brands, strategies, and capabilities to disrupt categories. If you want to learn more about us, check out wearerival.com. If you want to connect with Jenna, DuBose, or myself, email us at media@wearerival.com or find us on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, share with anyone you think might enjoy it, and leave us a review. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next week.